Hi, everyone, and welcome to tonight's evening sessions. For those who may be new to evening sessions, this is a monthly adult program series featuring a fun and engaging mix of presentations, lectures, workshops, demonstrations, author visits, and performances on topics covering arts, culture, history, science, and more. Upcoming evening sessions include our next one next month. With Sarah Krebs. She's going to be talking about the forensic art, identifying the living, naming the dead. And that's going to take place on Wednesday, March 3rd at 7 p.m. and registration is open now. But tonight we have Kareem Bowen. He's a Saginaw native. He wears many hats. He's a host, an author, a pastor, a speaker, a community leader, a small businessman. He is a very engaging speaker, and I hope you enjoy. Kareem?
Okay, good evening, everyone that's out there. I'm so glad you guys have tuned in to be with us on today. Certainly thank you, Emily, for the invitation and the introduction. So tonight I'm just going to share briefly. I would love to just kind of have an opportunity just to have a quick talk with you all. I want to share from the perspective or from the theme, the importance of a dream or the power of a dream. We could use both of those interchangeably. Once again, to give you a little bit, thank you for that introduction again. To give you guys a little bit about myself, I am born and raised. I'm a native of the Saginaw community. I think I've probably touched every single school district in the county at some point or another, but I graduated and was raised for the most part in Carlton and went to Carlton High School, graduated from Carlton High School, later going on to Michigan State University, where I majored in, in physiology, study of the human body. I went there, Spanish language, culture, those kinds of things. And I really want to just kind of talk about how life and the dream all took place. I got a cognate in Spanish language and culture at Michigan State University. I've spent the last 17 and a half years of my life as an executive business manager for NBA athletes, including those hometown boys that are here, Draymond Green and Jason Richardson. Done a number of things, had partnerships with Walmart, Best Buy, so many other corporate entities. But my biggest claim to fame, and I think that if you're watching, you probably can see just over the side of my shoulder, my biggest claim fame on the fireplace mantle is when I had an opportunity to do a partnership with President Barack Obama and his White House Fatherhood Initiative with a program that I designed and put together titled the Man Up Forum. And so over that 17-year period of working with the NBA, I worked with brands, corporations, entity, NBA Entertainment, and so many cool people across this nation. Sat in rooms with some of the coolest people. I think that they probably should be the people here instead of myself, but it's been an amazing journey for 17 years working with athletes and the brands that representing them. But most importantly, something that I fell in love with was just engaging young people and men across the country through the Man Up Forum, in which we've had partnerships from LA to Washington, D.C. But I really want to talk to you about the importance of a dream, because as I started out my path in life, that was never my end goal. I never saw the things that I was doing. I never thought of my dream being something that could catapult me to a place that I could sit in, rooms with Warren Buffett or, Michael Bloomberg, these great billionaires of the world. But life afforded me some amazing opportunities, and it was all because I started off as a young person with a dream. And so I just want to say good evening to all of you guys that are coming in. I see so many of you guys coming in, familiar faces. But I want to just share, because when I look at how all of this got started, I always tell people to dream a big dream. And I believe that dreams are necessary. They help to define your why in life. And when you begin to understand what your why in life, there is nothing on this planet that you are not capable of doing. Your why is the thing that will wake you up first thing in the morning. It's the thing that will keep you up late at night. It's the thing that is attached to purpose. And that purpose then fuels a passion in your life that gives you a zeal and a zest for living that you can't get anywhere else. So when I begin to think about this, I think about the fact that my dream started with me way back in seventh grade. And it's so funny because I saw that my mom is on here. And in seventh grade is where the dream started. And I'll tell you, it's the smallest things that can impact our lives in such a profound way. I remember the seventh grade was so important to my life because it was then that I was celebrated. I remember I was a track star. I played basketball, all kinds of sports. But it was in the seventh grade that I saw my parents and I saw them get excited about something that was really different. I was a single parent kid that grew up, and we'll talk about this on how you perceive yourself, how it often impacts the dream. All right. But in the seventh grade, I remember it being the National Honor Society. And it is so funny. My mom is probably like, what are you talking about? But in the seventh grade, I remember being acknowledged for being on the National Honor Society in the seventh grade. And I was the only there was one other African American, Choya Webb was a young guy, one of my greatest friends right now. And we were the only two Blacks that were on the National Honor Society. And my grandmother and my uncles and my mom and everyone that I looked up to celebrated me, and they really made a big deal about the fact that I was on the National Honor Society. And I remembered that day for the rest of my life. And I think this is important because I think that we need to understand how our lives are shaped and molded at an early age. And I remember the celebration and how it was different. My entire family could play basketball. My entire family was super talented. They all could sing. So when I was doing these other things, there were things that everybody else was good at and they all did. But in this particular situation, I was celebrated because I had gotten all A's, 4.0, and I was like, wow, if I can be celebrated in this way, and this is my own niche. And that's when in life I became the quote unquote smart person in the family, the smart kid. And that was all it took. And so the remainder of my life, I realized in that moment that if I can be the smart kid, if I could be the kid who worked the hardest to get good grades, that was worth celebrating because I love the fact that I was able to see a smile on my mother's face. And I don't know about many of you guys, but as a young Black kid in the community who's growing up, who's at that time, my mom was a single parent, seeing a smile on her face was one of my proudest moments. My grandmother and my mother were so excited. And it was in that moment that I began to have this idea or this concept that I could do something great. And if I did something great that centered around how smart I was being the smart kid, that it would be great. Well, and that was all fine and dandy until I got to the ninth grade and Mrs. Sovey's class. She gave me in social studies my first B, and I thought life was over because I got my first B. No, I'm just joking, but it did, and it changed how I viewed a lot of things. Now that I got the first B, I was no longer an all A student, but I didn't allow that to change my life. And I began to realize in that moment, I remember one of my uncles, and my Uncle Brian throughout my life, he's 4 years different than I am. But I remember my Uncle Brian being such a key integral part in my life. He was like, dude, you are so smart. Dude, you are so smart. And I would hear that all the time. And so in my mind, that positive reinforcement, dude, you are so smart. Dude, you're so smart. You can do anything, became something that was so profound. So when I got that first B, I didn't cash in the chips because I realized something, that a dream is a picture and a blueprint of my purpose and my potential. And when I began to realize that I'm not just dealing with making people happy, I'm not dealing with something that is just going to make, parents proud, which was something that I was excited about. I realized that what I was dealing with was something bigger than what I could ever imagine. It was a picture or a blueprint of my purpose and my potential. And it began me to to ask the question of myself, who is flaming the fans of the fire of my dream? And as I began to look at that and talking with those individuals, I looked at two individuals that were so key in me developing my understanding of who I was and what I was capable of. And the first person, my mother was always great and supportive, but my grandmother, who passed away in 2009, she made me feel like there was nothing that I could not do if I set my mind to it. And so I realized in that moment, she would say, your potential is unlimited. You can, sure, baby, you can do anything. Grandma, do you think I can fly to the moon? Sure, baby, you can do anything. But it was that motivation and it was that affirmation of my ability to achieve that she spoke to. And I also remember during the course of my life, I've had a number of mentors, but I would say the most impactful were my grandfather, my grandmother, and the late Bishop Marvin C. Pryor, who was my pastor growing up probably since about 8th grade. And I remember that he would always say something when we were kids, from the time that we joined that ministry. He would say that salvation plus education equals success. And so he was a great proponent of us really studying to show ourselves approved. Salvation plus education equals success. So it wasn't if you were going to school, it was where you were going to go to school and how you were going to go to school. And I remember one time sitting in his office and he said to me, son, you can never stop dreaming. You can never stop dreaming. And I was a great big dreamer. I believed that I could do anything at this point because my grandmother was winnowing the flames of the fire underneath my dreams. And then he said something that was so interesting that I also began to contemplate. He says, you need a dream, but what's more important than your dream is who's on your team. And I began to think about my dream and in reflection of who was on my team. And as I began to think about that, I said, wait a minute. And he would always use the example. And this is so funny because he would preach sermons about this. He was a great basketball fan. And he would always preach these sermons like, just like Michael Jordan, he had Scottie Pippen. And he would go through the whole lineup of all of the role players that were on Jordan's team, and how important they were just to be able to do their specific thing. But they were all a part of winning the championship games that made Jordan the GOAT, if you will. And for some of you who don't understand what the GOAT is, it means that you are the greatest out there of all time, the greatest of all time, GOAT. And so it explained why Jordan was the GOAT, because he had people on his team that understood their role, they understood where they were and what their responsibilities were. And I began to look at that. And he said something that I will never forget in my life. He says that you can only go as high as the number on your team. And I sat there like, what do you mean? He says, if your team is only a 5, you can never expect to be a 6. So if you surround yourself with people who are 6s and you desire to be a 7, don't look for it to happen. But in order for you to achieve greatness, you've got to allow those individuals on your team. If your dream is ever going to become a reality, then you've got to be with people who dream bigger than you do. And from that point on, I put together what I consider my divine 5. And so I would challenge all of you that are out there that as you begin to dream a big dream and you begin to say, you know what, I want to unleash the potential, my full potential, because purpose and potential are all the same. Purpose defines, the potential that you're here, and your potential shows you what level of purpose your life can arise to. And when I began to look at this, I began to realize the importance of my divine 5. Jordan had his team. He had the 4 guys that were with him, and the one that came on the bench, came off of the bench to make him the greatest of all time. And I began to put something together, which I would call my divine 5. And those people who know me very well, I can say these individuals by name because, I refer to them all the time. Barb, Sandra, Devetta, Shy, and Brian. And those individuals were the ones that challenged me to be the best that I could be. There were people that I saw something in them that I desired to possess. They were individuals that I thought were doing things much bigger than I could ever do. And they were individuals who really caused me to think about what were the things and was I truly fulfilling my potential. I'm going to tell you, one of the greatest kick in the pants was when I thought I was really doing great things. You have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in physiology. I applied to 4 medical schools. I got accepted to 2 of the 4 right off the bat. I mean, so many great things are happening. And my Uncle Brian comes, he goes, this is so cool. And I know that you think that you're doing great things. He says, and you are doing great things, but you are the biggest underachiever that I've ever met in my life. And when he said that to me, I thought to myself, well, how mean can you be today, buddy? But I thought about how mean that was. And I thought about like, dang. But then it settled in because I had to recognize who this was coming from. This was coming from one of my greatest cheerleaders. This was coming from somebody who was always, making sure that I had the wind underneath my wings. It's somebody who became one of the greatest father figures, even though he was only 4 years older than I was in my entire life. And I began to think about that. He said that I was the biggest underachiever that I've ever been in my life, and that he's ever met in his life. And I began to think about that. And I began to look at something, and I realized that it's not what you are that holds you back, but it was me. It was what I thought that I was not that kept me back from realizing my dreams. And so I want to share that with you. When you look at your dreams, it is not who you are that holds you back from realizing your dreams, but it's what you think that you're not. And as I begin to look at that and I began to take inventory on my life, and we're going to get through some of the cool things that I've talked about today, but I really want to give you some of this background information, because many times in life we see people at the climax of their life or at the ending of their life, and we say, wow, they did all of these amazing things. But it's important for us to be able to take a look at under the hood and to really see what was the thing that caused them to tick, because you don't become great just by existing, but there are things that have motivated you to live outside the ordinary. And I looked at this. I was a Black kid, born on the proverbial wrong side of the tracks, born into a single parent family. And by all means, when I look at that situation and when I look at what the statistics would say, I should have either been running the streets, selling drugs, or having babies, or doing something crazy. And when I began to think about it in light of me not actualizing my potential, I looked at my life and I said, what are the things that have prevented me from being the greatest that I could be? And it was because in my mind, I thought, I always had this longing. Why did my father leave? Why was my father not here? And it was something that said, because my father wasn't here, I had a past to not be the greatest that I could be. If my father was here, then I could have done this great thing. And I would linger, I would never even voice that to people. But I carried this stigma around because I was from a single parent home, that I couldn't somehow do the things that people who had both parents were there. Because I was a young Black kid growing up in a community that looked nothing like me, that I was limited in the things that I could do. And I realized in that moment when my uncle told me that I was the biggest underachiever, is that I was becoming okay with being average. I was okay with being just as good as my friends that were around me, because I was included in I was on the team. I was included in the gang. I was a part of the bunch. But I realized something very early in life about that situation. As I looked at my father not being a part of my life, I met him, as a matter of fact, when I was 17 years old, the day after my graduation. He thought he was coming to my graduation and showed up a day late. Thank God. No, but I loved him. We had a great relationship. We mended that relationship and had a great relationship until the time that he died. But I realized something about that. You cannot always control your circumstances, but you can control your thoughts. And as I began to think about that, I might not be able to control the circumstances or the situations or the place in life that I was brought into this world, but I could control my thoughts. So I began in that moment working on being, Being, and I stopped worried about becoming. And the moment I began working on being, I want to work on who I am as an individual, who I am as a person. I realized that there's nothing more powerful than a changed mind. And I need you all to understand today that as we talk about, this being Black History Month, even for February, the greatest thing about this, and we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King, even though there were so many other individuals who were a part of the civil rights movement and a part of the history of African Americans here in the United States, we celebrate Dr. King because Dr. King had a dream. And his dream came from someone who had a change of perspective. And as he began to change his mind, he then began to dream, and that dream changed our lives. Nothing changes until you change your mind. And so I was like, wow, this is an amazing a thought process. And so as we begin, and I want to encourage you guys that as you begin to look at what your place is in life, I need you to understand. I said something earlier that I want to go back to. You've got to worry about being. Stop worrying about what you will become and begin the process of changing who you are from the inside out. There's a scripture in the Bible that I love, that I live my life by. And it says, as a man thinks in his heart, that's the man. Whoever you think that you are, That's who you are, and that's who you'll always be. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And so I began to realize something as I began to change certain things in my life and change how I did certain things. I realized that the most difficult project in the world was the reconstruction of the human mind. To begin to think that I can do greater, I can be better, I can do more, I can challenge myself. There is nothing that I have, there are no limitations. And as I began to challenge myself, the greatest reconstruction of my life was when I began to change my mind. And I realized something, that if I'm ever going to be the best that I can be, that I must understand the power of five in my life. And this is a principle that I share with everyone that is in my life. It is the most important principle that governs everything that I've been able to do. And we'll talk about some of that as well, just in a little bit. I realized that I am the sum total of the five most influential people of my life. My dream is the sum total of the five most influential people of my life. The five individuals that I find myself investing and spending my time with. These are the individuals that will challenge my life to be the greatest. Now, what does that mean? That means that if you want to be great, you have to surround yourself around others who believe and desire that they can achieve greatness. And so you've got to begin to make the decision that the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stop trying to become. I'm going to be and start worry about being. Then I've got to begin to change my mind, because when I change my mind, I change my life. And then I also have to change my surroundings. I could not be with those who thought that just getting by was okay. I couldn't study with those individuals who were worried about just passing the calculus class, but I had to begin studying with individuals who said they want to be at the top of their class. Now, I was never the greatest in math. I'll be the first to tell you that. But what I did understand is that these principles that I was applying in school when I graduated from high school and then at Michigan State University became principles that would be eventually govern my world. All right. And I need you to understand, say this with me: open doors scream favor. That's what I realized, that every time in my life when there was an opportunity that was open, I realized something, that God loved me and that the favor of God was upon my life. And if his favor was upon me, there was literally no limitation for me to be able to do the things that I really desired to do. All right. And so I began to correct my perspective. You've got to begin to correct your perspective. And having the correct perspective is essential in realizing your dream. I want to tell you a quick story, a quick little anecdote, and this is so funny because it outlines how your perspective will be able to change and really navigates the course and tells you how great you truly can be. There's a story of three men who were laying brick. And in the story of this three men laying brick, there's a guy comes by the first day, and he asks the man, he asks man number one, "What are you doing?" And the guy says, "I'm laying some brick." And he gets back to work. The second day, the man comes around, he sees another guy, second man, and he says, "Hey, what are you working for?" The second man says, $5 lousy. Can you believe it? $5 lousy an hour. So the man leaves. And the third day, the man comes. He comes back and he's just taking a look and just seeing everything that's going on. He asks the third man, he says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I am building a beautiful cathedral so that people can come here and worship. And I can't believe I'm being paid to do it." And when I heard that story, it began to make me think about the power of your perspective. All three of these men were doing the same thing. All of them were laying brick, but it was their potential that made the difference in how their perspective that made the difference in how they were working and how they viewed their life, and also ultimately what they would achieve. Your attitude or your perspective towards your dream will determine when, how, and if you actually are able to realize that dream. And as I began to look at life and I thought about those words, you are the biggest underachiever that I've ever met in my life, echoed from somebody that I desired to only see me as doing great things. It allowed me to see something. From his perspective, he saw much more in me than I was seeing in myself. And so I had to begin to think, if this is what I have and this is all I have, I'm going to maximize this opportunity to the best and the fullest of my potential. And as I began to maximize my potential, my dream began to grow exponentially. I'm going to tell you, you sometimes, one of the greatest things that we need to do and we can do as it relates to fulfilling our dream is to change your perspective. If you continually look at, we're looking at the screen right now, and you're seeing me, and I'm sitting here having this conversation with you, you're seeing me eye to eye, that's one perspective. But if I were to take and sit at a higher place and to look down, there may be something else on the other side of the computer that I haven't seen before because I've only allowed myself one vantage point. And the thing that often kills so many people from having the greatest dream in their life is that when they look at themselves and they look at their life and they look at the cards that they were dealt, they never change their perspective. There's another story I want to share really quick, and it's really funny. There's a story. There's a grandmother, a great great grandmother. She's baking. She's always baked the turkey, and she's put the turkey in this 24-inch pan, and she would cook it, and she would put onions, tomatoes, bell pepper, and carrots in there, and she would allow it to soak down, and then she would take it and set it on the table on Thanksgiving Day. Well, great grandmother died. Grandma's now cooking. She would use a 24-inch pan, and she would put carrots and tomatoes and peppers, and she would put it in the pan, allow it to cook, pull it out of the pan, and put it on the middle of the table in that pan on Thanksgiving Day. Well, daughter now gets to a point that she has to now cook, and she puts the same turkey in the 24-inch pot. It was not the same. Well, hopefully they ate it the Thanksgiving before. She takes a 24-ounce pan, puts the turkey in it. She puts tomatoes, onions, peppers, carrots in there. She puts it in the oven. She lets it cook for the same number of hours. She takes it out. She puts it on the table for Thanksgiving dinner. Now it's the daughter's turn because the mother's older, and now the great granddaughter sits there, and she goes in there and she says, "Ma, why did you why do we use this pan to cook the turkey? You know, they got these new things here." She says, "I use this pan because it was a pan that my mother used. It was a pan that my grandmother used. It was a pan that my great grandmother used." And so she was only seeing her life and how to prepare this turkey through the perspective of those who were before, not understanding that the only reason that the great great grandmother ever used a 24-inch pan was because her stove was not big enough, her oven was not big enough to put a bigger pan in the oven. And so when we begin to allow our lives to be run by the things that we have seen, and we allow our vision or our dream to be contained by the influences that we were raised with, and not begin to change our perspective and look at life from a different perspective, we limit ourselves because we don't understand that there's a bigger playing field that we have the potential to operate from. All right. So what we see and what we hear are small things in comparison to what we think. It's important that you begin to challenge yourself and challenge your dream in the way that you begin to look at your vision or your dream. All right. I was challenged on how I dealt with disappointment. And I realized that the difference between expectation and realization and reality was only the failure. It was only a failure when I didn't realize my disappointments. You understand what I'm saying? It was only a failure. So the things that I did not achieve in life that most people would consider failure, I didn't consider those failures as long as one thing occurred. What did I learn from the disappointment? And what I began to realize is that if I didn't make it, if I didn't achieve it, if I didn't get to where I was going, it was not a failure. It may have been a disappointment, the difference between reality and what I expected, but it was not a failure. It is only a failure when you refuse to learn from your disappointment. Otherwise, I just call it research. Ah, Kareem, you failed. No, I didn't fall. It's just research. And so we've got to begin to change our perspective and understand that a dream, it may occur in one night, but it does not occur overnight. There is a series of obstacles and challenges that we have to have. And you've got to realize that everything that I learn from is not a failure, even if it feels bad in the moment. It's only research. And the more research you put into actualizing your potential and bringing your dream into a reality, then gives you the opportunity to really achieve great success. Don't settle for average. The moment you begin to settle for average or begin to settle for less, that is when you begin to receive less than what you settle for. All right, so let's begin to understand that. So my dream, and I realized this in life as I went from Michigan State, and I want to continue with some of the things that we're talking about, and we'll talk if you guys have questions. I don't understand why, but if you do have questions, we'll go there as well. Okay. As I left Michigan State, I decided that I wasn't going to go to med school. My parents thought I was crazy. You spend all this time in school, you're not going to finish med school. Nope, I'm not going to finish med school. I decided to start a sports marketing company. I've never been a professional athlete in my life. I've never worked in professional sports in my life. I didn't go into school for business, but I simply believed that I could do whatever I put my mind to. And I jumped ship and I became a business professional, studying professional sports, working with professional athletes, and trying to make this great dream of doing something great become a reality. My first client was Jason Richardson, who happened to also be my first cousin. So when you begin to set your sights and your hearts on doing something great, an opportunity will come, and every open door is the favor of God in your life. Okay, I see that question. I'm going to get that's funny. Thank you for your face. Okay, someone said the story of the 24-inch pan was always used to cook the turkey really well. It's home with me today. It is so true. We've got to be willing to change our perspective. Amen. All right. So, but when I began to do that, I said, you know what? I want to do something different. I don't want to be average. I want to take the word average out of my vocabulary. And I began to say, how can I live a very big dream? And I just began to put my head, who can I connect with that thinks better than I do? So I started this company. I'm managing now a professional athlete. He becomes, the dunk champion his first year. And suddenly I'm thrown in the midst of a situation that I've got to begin to understand how to operate in sports management. And I had no knowledge of this. But what I thought was I used this opportunity as a way to challenge myself in this newfound space. You can always be a big fish in a little pond. But when you throw yourself, and a fish will only grow to the size of its container. So I said, I'm ready to jump ship. I threw myself into this huge ocean as a little fish. And I began to trust the process. And many of you need to realize that stop being afraid. You've got to take a leap. Steve Harvey always talks about taking a leap and how you never leave the ground unless you first take a leap. And I began to operate in this place and I began to reach out and I asked individuals, how did you do what you're doing? And soon it's year number 4, year number 5. And I'm now working with corporate entities. We're doing partnerships and deals with Walmart. And I reach out to Sean John, Puffy Combs, and like, hey, I have a guy that wants to work with your stuff. Then I got other clients that are coming in. And I've had an opportunity to work with some of the top athletes in the world, become great friends with the Wades, D Wade and Mama Wade, and the entire family have become a close. The Johnsons, Magic Johnson's mom was the person who taught me how to do basketball camps. And so as we were going through these things, I began to align myself because I knew that there was a vision and a dream that was bigger, even than the NBA. I had no idea, but as I grew and my exposure grew, so did my dream. The reason why you have to change your perspective, the reason why you have to have exposure in life is because as you grow and as you are exposed to new things in life, so grows your dream. And I began to realize that there was anything that I wanted to do, I could always do it if I put my mind to it. So as we were going through that process, I said, you know what, we should do this program. Jay Rich was doing something with young kids. I said, why don't we do something called it the Men Up Forum, where we would challenge young boys and challenge men to have an honest conversation and to men up. And that's why we came up with the partnership with President Obama. And someone said to me, there's no way in the world you're ever going to get a partnership with the president. And I realized that if I worked hard and I called and I called and I got no and I got dead ends and I continued to call. And as I called, I saw the opportunity come up. And I happened to be in Detroit, Michigan, and went to a function with President Obama. And the rest is history. We ended up doing a 5-city tour across the country. And then I began to just work and continue to work that process, partnering with my Divine Five, my friends, and doing things with national celebrities and partnerships. And God began to do some amazing things. And so as I got toward the end of my career, because I was tired of living out of a suitcase, traveling across the country, going to countries, Italy, Milan, Paris, uh, every country you think of, you can name it. Everywhere except Great Britain. I've never been to Great Britain, but we traveled around the world, working with companies. Wahaha, which is a Chinese beverage company, Peak Shoes, doing these amazing things. I began to ask myself, okay, God, if I'm doing this now, and this is not the ultimate dream that you showed me. And he began to say, I'm expanding your horizons, I'm increasing your territory, and I am broadening your perspective. And so I realized that the time that I spent working with professional sports and professional athletes was God's opportunity to open my horizons and say, if you can do this for someone else, then you can begin to do this for yourself. If you can begin to open opportunities for someone else, then you can begin to redevelop and recreate a village. And so I came back home to Saginaw, Michigan. Yes, it's the thing that everyone wants to do, right? Come back home to Saginaw, Michigan. I came back to Saginaw like, woohoo, nah. I came back and I began to look at the state of my community. And God called me to pastor. I became a pastor. I founded a ministry, the Potter's Touch Ministries, International Ministries. And I use the word international because as we started, we ended up with members that wanted to be connected to the church from Germany and from Switzerland, from other places. And now we are a church that is here in the city of Saginaw with partnership agreements in ministry with 8 countries across the world. The ministry grew very fast to about 200 members. And then we began to do things on campus, hundreds of students on campus. And I just saw God doing something amazing. And there's something that I always wanted to do as a kid growing up that I said I was going to do. I set out to start a construction company. So I partnered up with another young man that I'd known my entire life, and we started the first Black contracting company that was able to really get involved with some of the mainstream building. There were other contractors, but because of the relationships, and understand the key to your dream and the excitement and the fulfillment of your dream is going to come through the relationships and the partnerships that you have. And because of those relationships, and I value those relationships, they open doors for me to have a now full service contracting company employing men and doing great things in our community. We went from there. I'm now consulting with companies. And it's crazy because I used to think that money was the most important thing in the world. And as I continue to live out, I realized that money is not the most important thing in life, but it's information and relationships. And as I began to go through that process, of really beginning to define, God, I want to be purposeful in what it is that you want me to do. And I began to look at where he wanted me to operate. I began to realize that people wanted information. I don't understand why they want information from me, but I realized that information is one of the greatest forms of currency, information and how to apply it. So I began working as a consultant for companies. And even right now, working with companies, how they can be more effective. How do you partner with community programs? How does a community program partner with a corporate entity to bring a mutual beneficial relationship? So we begin to do these things. I began to share and sow those things into the people that are around me. I said something to you about who's on your team as you begin to look at your vision. Your vision is essential, but who's on your team is very essential. And you've got to begin to pour into the individuals that are a part of your team. Because after all, if they're only a 5, you can never operate above a 5. So it's important for you to sow everything that you can in them so that they can become 10s. And then you're able to operate on a level that you believe is essential to make your dream a reality. So from there, we've been doing a number of things. The ministry is going well. COVID has been a challenge, but the ministry has grown in the midst of COVID. We're now doing creative business solutions, which is a business jumpstart program where we're helping entrepreneurs start businesses and do great things. God is doing so many things, and it's just a blessing to be able to be here with you all today. And as I bring this back, I begin to think about February being Black History Month. And I began to think about the power of Martin Luther King's dream. And I was asked just recently, as I told you all, with Microsoft, to do some things with them. And as I was going through the place that Martin Luther King was raised, or he was not raised, but where he was doing a lot of the planning for the Great March on Selma, I was looking and realizing the power that one individual or one man or woman has when they begin to realize that their dream is necessary and their dream is connected to so many other individuals. And understanding that unlocked something in me that helped me to understand what my uncle was saying when he said that you're the greatest, you're the biggest underachiever I've ever had in my life. Because I realized that I was living my dream and I was living my vision for myself, when in fact, there are so many other people that need to live and to build from the dream that God has given me. And so your dream is not just for you, but it's for those who are supposed to come, that you're supposed to support and catapulting them to the next level of greatness in their lives. I want to thank you guys for this time and talking and conversation. And if you guys have any questions, I'm looking at Jeanette Marks, the comment that you made, the story of the 24-inch pan was always used to cook the turkey, really hits home with me today. Nothing to do with the cooking, but it's our view that directs our actions. Parents can get caught up in that thinking when they lean on what they learn from their parents. Absolutely. We've got to make sure that we change our perspectives continually. If there's any other questions, you can put them in the stream, or Emily and Kirsten will also field those questions. If we have any questions from those who are listening, thank you for your time on today. I greatly appreciate it. Is this where I break out in song?
Maybe, I don't know. Thank you everyone for coming by today. I'm just gonna wrap us up, but if you do have any questions, pop them in and we'll get them to Kareem. Just as a reminder, we do have our evening sessions happening twice a month. So we, like I mentioned at the front, we have oh goodness, Detective Sarah Krebs is going to be speaking with us on March 3rd. And registration is open for that. And actually starting today, registration is also starting for our March 17th evening sessions, which will be a virtual tour of Hell's Half Mile, looking a little bit into Bay County history for that one. Yeah, and then the library is now open for browsing. So I just wanted to mention that as well. We did reopen for browsing starting this past Monday. So for those who maybe have missed coming in to see us, come by and we'll get you all set up. Oh, it looks like we actually do have a question there. It looks like Frank Sanders said, you said to focus on being as opposed to becoming. Can you share an example of how we can implement this train of thought in our lives?
That's a great question. I want to say something about the library first. I had an aunt that would never let us go. She'd be like, go read a book. And, she was the mother of 6 kids, single parent mom, and she would read books and literally travel in her mind, go in her bathtub, read a book and travel. A book is a gateway. He who reads leads. I say that all the time. All right. So the difference between being and becoming. Oftentimes in life, we spend a great deal of time focusing on what we want to become, and we make plans as though everything that we're going to do centers around this future person that we're going to one day magically appear. And focusing on being means that instead of deferring the changes that I can make today, and waiting for them to magically happen at some point in time, I began to look at how can I be who I desire to be in the future today? What steps are necessary for me to internally take a look at that I can begin to make subtle changes? Because I'll tell you that change in life is like it's a 33 LP. It's a record. And many of you probably like, what's a record? Because you're used to digital media. Everything is quick. Everything is fast. You're used to CDs and things. But a record was something that you would have this phonograph and it would just go around for a while before the music would play. It takes time. And when you begin to make subtle changes in your life, you eventually hit that groove that's in the record. And this is going to be lost for some of y'all. Go Google record. How about that? You'll hit the groove on the record, and then you'll eventually begin to play the music of your life, which will lead you to the place of destiny or purpose that you desire to be in. So great question there, Frank. And so those of you who are listening, if you want to listen, shameless plug, tune in on Sundays at 7 p.m. on 100.5 and 790 a.m. 100.5 FM, 790 a.m. I do a radio show called United Shades of Gray, where we have conversations on race in America. And then we also have another show that's on kisswtlz.com, Kiss 107.1, which is Straight Talk with Kareem Bowen, and we give it to you straight, no chaser, no filter. So I want to thank you guys once again. Emily, thank you for this opportunity. This has been amazing.